What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me is my great co-host, Ralph Hanna. And guys, here we are, another month, another international break. Obviously, we have Paraguay in the Far East taking on Japan and South Korea. We'll talk, one game just happened at the time of recording, so we'll talk about that in a second. We'll also talk about what's been going on with Paraguay at the U20 level in Chile, some pros and some cons, of course. A lot of dramatic action going on in the domestic race as well. Certainly what we've been seeing in the Clausura, we still don't know who's going to win it. The Intermedia obviously finished up with Rubio and San Lorenzo going up at a brutal way for River Plate to go down. We'll talk about that in a second. And we got Copa Paraguay. We finally have our quarterfinals. We have it all settled. It's going to be a very interesting affair, to say the least. And can Cerro Porteño finally break the hump and not just try to win that for the first time, but also break their trophy ground. So a lot to mention, but actually we do want to start on a very somber note. Actually, unfortunately, this week also we had the passing of Miguel Angel Russo, obviously a legendary coach in Argentine football, having managed clubs like Boca Juniors, Rosario Central, among others. But obviously, from the Paraguayan connection, he obviously had the chance to manage El Porteño for quite some time. His stint was very small, of course, but hey, he was still recognized as a bona fide professional. He got some famous wins actually in the Libertadores, the game against San Lorenzo. And yeah, of course, we have to. I guess I don't want to start on a somber note, but we do have to mention that unfortunately, he is no longer with us. He passed away the other day due to complications to of a disease of cancer that he'd been dealing with for quite some time. So, Ralph, I do want to start on this, but yeah, it's sad to see Miguel Russo pass away. But what are your memories of him when he was at a Porteño manager?
Yeah, much loved professional in football, which I think we were saying is always a hard thing to do because ultimately you manage somebody like Boca, you usually bring up rivalries and difficulties, but he was always well respected. Gustavo Alfaro talked about him in the press conference before the Japan game as well as somebody he'd worked very closely with and faced off against. Yeah, I remember that. I think the most famous game, it was a short time at Cerro, but the Copa Libertadores and getting that result. And if I remember rightly, it's the time when Nelson Ido Valdez is back as well at Cerro, and so there was that kind of resurgent of the team trying to pick themselves up again and looking for titles. So yeah, it's very sad to hear and like I was saying, a very much loved person across football, which is a very hard thing to do because football is based on rivalries and competition. So it can be very hard for somebody to be universally liked, like Miguel Angel Russo was.
As we obviously send our condolences on behalf of everyone here at Guarani Vision to him, his family, and of course all of his loved ones. And of course, now let's start off with obviously sticking to Paraguay because obviously we have just woken up about a couple hours ago, actually early, because we woke up early to see Paraguay take on Japan in Osaka, the first friendly for Paraguay after qualifying for the World Cup, after finishing off the World Cup qualification. So it has been just preparation time, and obviously we'll talk about the result and the game as a whole. But let's actually start with the lineup first, real quick, because I think you want to use these friendlies, and everyone has a different approach on how to use it and not. And the fact that Paraguay had two to deal with, one against Japan and then one against South Korea, you would think that you would have one team for one game and that the other game would be another team with maybe some small adjustments on those who come to the first game. But let's talk about the lineup real quick. We obviously had Gatito Fernandez in goal, which we'll talk about his performance in quite a few minutes. We had the defense of Juan Cáceres, Gustavo Gomez, Omar Leret, and Junior Alonso, virtually unchanged. It seems like that will be the the standout defense, the starting defense up until the World Cup if there are no injuries. In the midfield, we saw Andre Cubas and Damian Bobadilla. Of course, I think that feels like, the starting lineup that we've been used to. I'll start with the attacker real quick. With up top, we had Tony Sanabria again. I feel like he's also been kind of earning that spot just because of the form that he's been. Almiron and Diego Gomez both in the midfield as well, and one new name that actually got his first call up with the Paraguay team, and he actually just got his first start. It was Diego Gonzalez of Atlas. He finally got his chance to play. But Ralph, I'll go to you real quick. I mean, did you expect this lineup? Did you think that Gustavo Alfaro wasn't going to take much risk, or do you felt that maybe for some of these games he could have been a bit different with some of the players that he could have had at his disposal?
Yeah, it's a good point if he was going to do a mixed team in both games, or what I'm guessing now, having seen this very strong lineup, like you mentioned, is pretty much the best team he could have put out. Maybe he's going to mix it up more against Korea in the next match, because you would assume that he wants to try things out and see something new. I suppose it's a cautious way to also try new players, like in the case of Diego Gonzalez, because he has a gap there that he can't really fill without Julian Cesar. I think he was looking at, Caco Romero usually comes on in every game, but he's not the right style of player to start matches from the way Paraguay want to play. And so Gonzalez kind of fits that role quite well. And he's a really interesting person just to touch on, because if you look at his career, he was one of those players that, because he's born 2003, when he's 17 the pandemic hits, so he never makes his professional debut in Paraguay, because Paraguayan football stops, and unless you were a pro, you're out of contract. And so he ends up making his debut in Panama in 2021. So it's a quite interesting career path. He plays in Peru, he plays in second division in Mexico, and that's when he gets called up to the U20s, and it's his U20s form that sees him get the move to Lazio. And at that point, I think everyone realizes, okay, Diego Gonzalez has a lot of talent here. Didn't work out in Serie A. He never really got, I don't think he even got a senior game there. And now he's back in Mexico at Atlas. But it's an interesting career for someone who's 22. He's already played in about four countries, gone all around, and now he finally gets his debut. And by the way, I thought he performed quite well today in terms of some of the work he was doing. Paraguay looked much stronger on the right hand side with him and Juan Cáceres than I think they did on the left with Almiron and Junior Alonso, mostly because Almiron was doing a lot of good work, but he was having to come in and almost fill spaces that Sanabria was leaving, because Sanabria had a tough time today playing against a back three. He You can't really just stay in the middle against a back three, right? So he was trying to pull them out of space, make space, which is actually how the first goal comes for Paraguay. But it also meant that you had some of that lopsidedness where the left side was open, and I think Japan ended up getting a lot of crosses through down their right hand side, Paraguay's left. So it was. I'm already going into the game now as we talk about it, but it was interesting just to see with that lineup. That's maybe where you're going to have some of the difficulty if you end up playing a back three with just Sanabria, because he's going to want to move around. People are going to have to fill in those gaps, and then you could leave yourself open on the flanks. In the end, Japan put in something like 26 crosses. I mean, that's a very high number of crosses to allow to be attempted, and it's just partly because of the way the system worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's actually go to the game real quick. And it's good that you mentioned Almiron because he obviously got the first goal for Paraguay. He gave Paraguay the lead. Actually, should have scored right before on. He had a nice, decent one-on-one chance minutes beforehand, but obviously he didn't score that one. But really nice goal, really great assist from Damian Bobadilla from midfield as he played the ball in to Almiron. He was able to control it with his foot and then obviously finished it off right past the Japanese goalkeeper. Really nice finish, wasn't it, Ralph?
Yeah, it was a really well taken goal. And like you said, it's funny. It was the easy chance. Well, he didn't even shoot in the easy chance, right? He got played through, and then he decided to try and square the ball across, because maybe he's lacking on confidence. He hasn't scored a huge amount for Atlanta at the moment, especially not in open play. But then he makes that great run, like you said, Damian Bobadilla had a very good game, puts the ball in, and it's the control is has to be very good, because there's little time space, and then scores what is his ninth goal. I mean, he's the highest scorer for Paraguay in terms of the active players right now. I was just checking my stats. He's moved into the top 20 of all time for Paraguay with just those nine goals. He's equal with Derlis Gonzalez at the moment in terms of another contemporary. But it was very nice to see from Almiron, because I think under Alfaro he's been so good defensively in terms of helping with the shape, ball progression, but he's never really been on the end of things. And so to see that today, I think was kind of exciting, to know to remind ourselves about the Almiron that can score goals and can be in the box. And that's going to be so important, assuming we always play this system with just Sanabria up front. You're always going to need other players to kind of join in and help support, especially those two wingers you're going to have, which Almiron's one of them. Gonzalez was today. It will be Julian Cesar maybe. So it's having that balance is going to be so important.
So looking at the first goal for Japan, because then they obviously equalized 5 minutes later. It was actually a really nice shot from Ogawa. But the main talking point is that Gatito had a really decent save on it, only for it to kind of lose control, and ultimately the ball went into the back of his net. I mean, he should have done better, didn't he? He should have done better.
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's a great camera angle from behind the goal. So you can actually see Gustavo Gomez, who's now looking at his goalkeeper, expecting the save, and he doesn't make it, and kind of the disappointment on his face and the side eye he gives Gatito because you feel like he should be saving that. I mean, the shot's not particularly high. It's kind of I don't know if it was claimable in terms of catching, but it didn't seem like it was going to be that difficult to save, and then he ends up pushing it into his own net. It also came that whole attack was had continued because he hadn't claimed the ball correctly like just a minute before. I think there's a cross and he like punches it where he could have caught it. And there's been an issue. That's always been the issue with Fernandez is he's a really good shot stopper, although we're just talking about a mistake now that he's made. But usually he's a really good shot stopper outside of the box, but also inside of the box. And he did make two or three good saves inside the box during the game. But there's always been issues with coming out and claiming crosses or his positioning. And this was one of those where I think he's probably like a step or two too far out. And so when he does push the ball up, instead of it going over the net, it actually drops in. And one of the big criticisms I think people have at the moment is not of Gatito himself, is more the situation of where he's not playing for Cerro. He's not getting many minutes. He's played Copa Paraguay, but he's not the regular starter. And so without that match practice, is he the right person to be throwing in to these games? And we've seen in the World Cup qualifiers, Alfaro continued using him, except for the last one with when he put in Gil. But there's the question marks now. I think people are saying, well, if he's going to stay at Cerro and be on the bench, is he the right person for the World Cup? So January is going to be a big moment for him. Should he move on and look to get more minutes?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like Gatito's gonna be a recurring theme. I think for the whole sort of friendlies that we have, especially if Alvaro is going to continue to give him this confidence. Obviously, let's go to the second goal because obviously Paraguay took the lead twice in this game, and the second goal came from a really, really nice finish. I would say it was a nice little cross from Juan Cáceres from the right, and ultimately it found the head of Diego Gomez for him to score as it hit the woodwork and it went up the up and down, up and then down into the goal. Really nice finish. And obviously, it shows the kind of performances that Diego Gomez has been having. Obviously, we spoke about how good he's been doing at Brighton now that he's on, what, 5 goals this season. And now he scores another one for Paraguay. So it's been a good month or so for Diego Gomez. And now he's demonstrating that form for Paraguay. His first goal since scoring against Brazil uh, almost 2 years ago as well. So comes at a right time.
Yeah, that's right. Because I think he had a good first half. The thing about Diego Gomez, he's always in the thick of it. Somehow always either trying to win the ball back or trying to do something progressively. And I just felt, but he wasn't having any of that. The end product that we weren't seeing much from him. He didn't make any key passes. He didn't have any shots in that first half. And then in the build up to the goal, it's actually a very nice move where I think Bobadilla again plays a pass through the lines, and there's a nice flick from Diego Gonzalez to Diego Gomez. His shot's blocked, and then it comes out to Cáceres. And what I think Gomez does really well there is he had his shot blocked and he could have become an option outside of the box, but he saw the opportunity to get in the box, support Sanabria, because like we're saying, Sanabria is playing against these three central defenders. It's if you're just one striker and you throw crosses in, it's not going to work. So he supports it, and the cross from Cáceres is very good. As we know, he's done that in the qualifiers from set pieces. Today he does it from open play. Really good cross and a great header from Diego Gomez. And like you say, just his second goal for Paraguay, but he likes to he likes to pop up at the right time, and he keeps that good form going, and he's going to be such a key player for Paraguay at the World Cup because of what we were just talking about there. He had a very good first half in terms of recovery, ball recovery, and just being in and around. It was a very intensive game with a intense press from Japan, and he's at that rhythm, but then he can do things at the other end of the pitch as well and scoring goals.
And absolutely was going at the right time as well for Paraguay because obviously they were close and they haven't beaten Japan actually since the World Cup in 2010. So they were on a 16-year streak of head-to-heads where Paraguay couldn't be able to win a game. Then they were so close, but then of course something that it's going to be a recurring theme today in terms of heartbreak. Paraguay suffered some heartbreak right at the end, even though it's not the heartbreak of losing, but heartbreak of being close to a win. It was a cross from Japan on the right side, and ultimately it was found to Ayase Udea to score right past Alex Arce, right past Gatito. Again, I think he should have been doing better on that one. I think, looking back at the replay, I think someone should have maybe got onto it quicker. Maybe it would have been Gatito, but yeah, just a brutal way to end the game, even though Paraguay were in a good position to finally win there.
Yeah, it was disappointing because I think it's been 30 years since Paraguay beat Japan in Japan, so they were close to that. Like you said, last kind of victory was the World Cup, and the last win in 90 minutes was like 1999 Copa America. So
Mm,
there was all of those things. In fact, Japan have a very good home record. I was seeing they've only really lost to Colombia in a friendly recently. That's in the last 2 years. They're very strong at home, and maybe that came through, right? That they had that will to find the equalizer because they really were. I kind of felt, even though Paraguay were leading the game, a lot of what we saw from Japan, they were very good. I mean, they were much better pressing. They were very organized. They had that clear plan of getting the ball wide and trying to get in crosses, which generally suits Paraguay because of Alderete and Gomez. But in this case, I mean, they managed to find the way to get the equalizer. And yeah, you mentioned Gatito. I think it's another one where you think maybe he should have done better. It's a hard one. I mean, it's a very good ball into the box, but I think it bounces inside the 6 yard box. So usually if a ball bounces in the 6 yard box, you would have hoped your goalkeeper could have cut that out. And that's just what we're talking about, right? It's always been one of his weaknesses is that coming out, claiming, stopping crosses. So it was kind of a disappointing end because of all those things we are just talking about, like historically, and the keeping up this good mood in the camp. But ultimately, I think Paraguay should be pretty pleased with how they did today. It's still a good result, and I think it was a good performance in terms of there were at times where we saw what we want to see from Paraguay. So some of those moves they made to get the goals. It was nice to get 2 goals from open play as well after Paraguay's been so reliant on set pieces, which is fine, but you can't always do that. And I think the other thing I just wanted to highlight that I really liked today was Damian Boadilla. I thought he had an excellent game. He makes the assist. He completed all his long passes. He had like 96% or 98% pass completion. And this was in a game where he was really tested in terms of the Japan press. Japan, they want to press high, they want to be intense. They were able to do that for the pretty much the whole game, and Boadilla still found the way to get through that. When other players struggled a bit, I noticed Almiron struggled a bit with that. He was finding it harder. Sanabria really couldn't. I mean, he gave the ball away a lot because he really wasn't able to deal maybe with the pace of the game. He's also not playing as many minutes as maybe we would have hoped. So there's that standout from Boadilla who, if he can be the guy to play alongside Cuevas, because we know we're always gonna want to play with Cuevas, we're starting to see everything fitting into place, right, as we want. Because before, between Bobadilla, maybe Galarza, even Villasanti. Now Villasanti's injured; he's obviously not playing, but there was still maybe some of those doubts. And I think for me, the performance today from Bobadilla gives me a lot of confidence that he'll be able to do it in the World Cup against those teams that are also able to be much more intense in midfield.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think, you could also say the same about Diego Gonzalez. I thought he was very effective and, for his debut, it's always such a big daunting task for anyone to make their debut in Paraguay, especially, against like a team like Japan. But I thought he fit the bill well, didn't look that much out of place. But yeah, no, I think obviously the result would have been better if they had gotten the win, but I think you could take a lot of positives. Alfaro has still only lost one game in 14 games as a manager. That's a really good record. And yeah, obviously the draws are picking up a bit more than they should, but I think they're still very much a cohesive side that can obviously cause a lot of danger to a lot of teams. But I think it's the question of how effective they can be in those type of matches. I mean, something like that could, I'm not saying that this this is gonna happen, knock on wood, but like something like this at the World Cup can happen when you're in a position where I don't know, it's the group stage and you have 3 points, and then this happens and you only have one. So, that can determine if you qualify or not. So I'm just using an example, of course, but I feel like, those are some of the things that Alfaro will need to drill in these guys is that they need to finish off the games properly. And, I think just, utilize that sort of confidence and build. And I think that the harmony of the team is great. Like you said, I think the whole, group unity is there. But it's also the case of just trying to fix those little things to allow themselves to really improve as a unit. And obviously, I think the next test will be, of course, against South Korea. That is their next opponent on Tuesday, who actually just got smashed by Brazil 5-0 on home soil as well. So I mean, what changes do you want to see? I think the big one, obviously, I mean, surely Gatito doesn't play this one. I think it's time for Orlando Gil to get his chance against Korea.
Yeah, I think it would be nice to see Orlando Gil get a chance because, yeah, we know what we're going to get from Gatito in terms of great shot stopper, difficult on crosses. We saw that today and we just talked about it. Um, I, I don't know. I mean, maybe at left back, it could be nice to see Diego Leon and see like a difference between Junior Alonso's more a central defender playing left back, right? And we've seen Alvaro seems to want to he doesn't want both his fullbacks to be going forward a lot. He's like, I'll have one and not the other. Um, so maybe if he does that, he puts Velasquez as right back instead of Cáceres, right? And he gets more defensive on that side. But I think it would be nice to see someone like Diego Leon and someone a bit more attacking down that side. What I also think that would be a very interesting combo with Almiron, because we're just talking about how Almiron makes a lot of runs inside, um, and then you'll have Diego Leon bombing on, so you'll have like a very attacking and an overload on the left side. It could be interesting. What else? I mean, I wasn't too impressed with Sanabria today, but I also don't know who. I,
Ronaldo Martinez, I mean, he's been doing well with Platense.
yeah, but he came on again today, didn't have a huge impact. He's one of those players that he hasn't really made the difference at international level yet, but it could be one for him to check out. But ultimately, I don't think I want to see too many changes because I like what Alfaro's trying to do is just build in, make sure I have the backups for the occasional position. Because if you get everybody playing together that are totally new and will never end up all playing together in a game, it doesn't make as much sense. I think the kind of key changes, two or three, is maybe what I'd prefer to see. So definitely it'd be good to see Diego Leon get some minutes. But I wouldn't want to touch now. I like that Cubas, Bobadilla, Gomez three in midfield. I wouldn't want to change that so quickly as they're just starting to get time playing together.
Yeah, I think it ultimately is that. It's just trying to work well with what you have. And I mean, again, you look at the lineups that Alvaro has been able to put in. Again, it's the same names. Like there aren't no big surprises unless there's like again injuries or absences or something like that. But he's still trusting with his base of players, and I think it's I think it's good that he is insisting on that. Obviously, it opens up debate, like with obviously Gatito and other players, but you feel as if though if the spirit is working well, who's to say that it is enough to break it? So we'll see how it goes. I mean, before we close it out here and get into the U20 World Cup in a bit, how do you see this game in South Korea? Obviously, we won't have a show next week. We'll be off, and we'll talk about it until after these games. But how do you see the game against South Korea? I know they just came off a 5-0 loss against Brazil, so they definitely want to come back and I guess come with a vengeance. I guess against us. Who knows?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's probably the worst result for them to have because they'll definitely be more focused, I think, and there'll be some of that willingness to get a result now against Paraguay. I mean, I'd like to see something similar that we saw today. We don't need a nil-nil draw, right? We want to see trying to put some attacking patterns together, and if that it does mean you're a little bit exposed, then you would be in a tournament game. That's fine. So one thing I have picked up is Alfaro. This was the sixth game that we scored two goals. And so I quite like that because we know Alfaro defensively, organizational, the strength he has. The issue is always going to be what if we do concede and can we go on and get something? So seeing those two goals today, even though it ended up a 2-2 draw, is actually quite positive for me. So that's I'd like to see something similar where we take a few chances, build up some of those attacking patterns and get some goals. And even if it does end up a 3-2 defeat, it wouldn't be the end of the world, I think.
So you're saying 3-2 to South Korea then?
No, that's like a hypothetical.
Oh,
I
go for a
think
prediction.
Japan
Might as
might
well.
win. I
Paraguay
think
wins.
we'll win 2-1.
I'll be. I hate being conservative. I just feel like the way it is with these type of games. I'll say 1-0 Paraguay. Honestly, I mean, I don't know if South Korea. I mean, obviously they're going to come with a vengeance. Obviously, after losing, they really want to bounce back, but they don't want to obviously lose at home as well. So I'll be conservative and say 1-0. Which again, if you take a draw, and considering all the factors in of jet lag, lack of time and all that. I mean, you could come off this tour with a really with positive vibes, I would say, honestly, Rob. I mean, we'll finish on that, but honestly, if you come off this tour unbeaten with either a draw or a win coming off the Japan result, it's actually a really good result considering all the circumstances.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you make a great point about the obviously the travel and the jet lag, and also the fact that in Korea and Japan combined, Paraguay have only beaten them once, which was the 1995 game against Japan, like when they play against them in their home country. So they've actually never won in Korea against South Korea. So it would even a draw is a good result. The last time was the 2-2 with Almiron scored twice. So maybe Almiron gets another goal because he does seem to like playing against Asian teams. He's now four of his nine goals against AFC teams because he's got the two against Korea, Japan, and Jordan. So maybe he gets on the score sheet again. He might be your goal scorer in the 1-0. But yeah, I think even a draw is a very positive result. And it's more like you say, it's not as much looking at the results. It's more just looking at some of the style of play and trying out players
They
because
are friend.
that's what
They are,
we're
they are friendlies after all. Everyone has to take into consideration. They are friendly. They are not World Cup
exactly.
or any competitive game. So let's switch gears to an actual competitive tournament, the U20 World Cup. Obviously, we saw Paraguay play in the U20 World Cup. It's been quite some time since we spoke about it, but of course, a lot has changed ever since we did speak about it. But obviously, Paraguay went to the U20 World Cup with a lot of hope, a lot of expectation. Thankfully, they were able to get out of a group that was very much it was a tight and difficult one, but they actually did it at the expense of, hey, South Korea again. Paraguay got a 0-0 draw against South Korea, one of those gritty games. Then they finished off with a 2-1 loss to Ukraine, but because South Korea had only beaten Panama 2-1, Paraguay were able to finish above South Korea because of the overall record. Paraguay had only scored 4 goals, whereas Korea has scored 3, which meant that in the round of 16 they had to take on Norway. And yeah, this was one of the frustrating games, I would say, for Paraguay. They got a penalty early on. Thiago Caballero hitting the post. It was actually a really good save as well from the goalkeeper Funks. I'm gonna butcher his name, so I'm sorry if he hears this. Fauxhanger, Einar Fauxhanger, the 17-year-old who had a really good performance in goal at 17. He was incredible. And then, of course, in typical Paraguayan fashion, Fogelstad gets the goal in the 116th minute when they were pushing for penalties. So, yeah, a brutal way for Paraguay to end the round of 16, to end the U20 World Cup, their first time since 2013, ironically, in the same way that they also lost in extra time, losing, I think it was Iraq, if I'm not mistaken, back in Turkey. And yeah, Paraguay's dream ends, but more so of the results. I think a lot can be said about, The discourse has been really go. We'll talk about the sort of discourse and all that kind of stuff, but let's talk about the game first. Paraguay really should have taken advantage in this one. I thought Norway looked very much vulnerable in a lot of positions, and they just couldn't take advantage of it.
Yeah, it was I mean, I haven't seen many games where Paraguay at any level end up with like 67% possession because that's just not how Paraguay set themselves up to play. But Norway, it was, I mean, it was pedestrian. They were honestly, they were just hoping to try and like goad Paraguay into pressing them high, and Paraguay's like, we're not going to play that game. And so they would have their center backs on the ball for like I don't know how many seconds, and then they go long, and they would always looking for the same thing to get. They had Haaland, no relation to Erling, and I can't remember the other player, but they had the two wingers. They were just trying to expose them one on one against Paraguay because they were the two technical players Norway had. Everybody else just didn't seem very good. I mean, to be very blunt about it, or technically not very good. I mean, okay, they were athletic, they're big, but it was a strange game, like the way Norway just kept playing long balls. And Paraguay suffered a little bit before they figured it out. And then once I think Winyasu and Baruja got on the ball more in midfield, it was really like I said, 67% possession. Paraguay were controlling things. And like you mentioned, they win the penalty, which is because of the green card, this new like challenge system that they're doing. And Alcaraz correctly challenges at that moment. They get the penalty, and Caballero at first, I thought it was a good save. When I looked at the replays, I was like, maybe it's a little bit too close to the goalkeeper. It's slightly too easy for him. But that was really sets the tone for, like you said, Norway's goalkeeper. I'm not even going to try and pronounce, who had such a great game. I mean, he makes so many important saves in the match. Paraguay had so much. Paraguay get another goal as well, but the goal is disallowed. Kind of rightly so. Again, this is the green card coming in, so Norway challenged the goal. And it's one of those ones where there's lots of pushing in the box, but I think the issue here is the push is done by the Paraguayan player Duarte, who ends up heading the ball into the goal. I think if it hadn't have been the direct player that scores, maybe that goal gets given. So I mean, everything was just pointing to Paraguay taking this, and to lose at the very end like that was, yeah, it was kind of, I don't know, it just
Frustrating. It was frustrating. I mean,
frustrating. Yeah, I
yeah,
think
that's as
that's
simple as you
that's the
can
best
go.
word for it. It was because I don't think Paraguay were playing for penalties per se, and I don't think they did anything wrong except of not having taken their chances during that match. Um, I mean, maybe we can focus on some of the positives. I mean, they defended really well. I think Quintana, Balbuena have been very good. Maidana at left back. The big miss they had was Diego Leon, right? Because Diego Leon played the Sudamericana. Now Man United obviously didn't want to release him for this, but they found Maidana in the Guarani left back, who's been, I think, really good. And Guarani have been producing left backs because they have Cantero, he's ended up at Olympia, but he was in a previous Sudamericano. So they're producing these left backs, but I thought Maidana was very strong and combined well with Cesamino, another Guarani player that they were maybe the two best we saw since Enzo Gonzalez wasn't present, but it just wasn't enough in the end. And yeah, it's frustrating, I think, because this was a game they could have won, and they could have got that extra match and a bit more experience at this level.
Absolutely. I mean, there have been some discourse about this whole U20, U19 sort of rule about how Paraguay have kind of, the league obligates a player that is U19 to go, but then what are they doing when they go back to the senior team? And I mean, we can have a big discussion on this as a whole, Ralph, but like, how do you feel? Do you feel like this rule has kind of hindered and, this Paraguay team in this result, basically like a butterfly effect in the way, or is it, other things going on?
No, no, I would say in a way the opposite because if you look at that Paraguay team, they have so many senior minutes between them, especially the defense, apart from Balbuena, who plays in Lanús and he's in reserves. But I mean, there there's a lot of experience, first team experience in there, and that's thanks to the under 19 rule in a way. I mean, someone like Lucas Guiñazú, he's not good enough to play in Libertad's midfield, and so he ends up going to Tembetaru. And a club like Tembetaru to fill the under 19s role, they need a player like him, actually, someone of that quality that they can afford to give minutes to without giving up too much, giving up too many results. Tembetaru haven't been great this year, but I mean, the point being, he wouldn't. Someone like Winyasu, I don't think would have played over 1,000 minutes senior football this year if it wasn't for that rule, and that's only positive ultimately. So no, I don't think the rule in itself is a problem. For me, I think the big question was that they left out a player that doesn't play any football, Luca Kamet, but was the best player in the Sudamericano, and so it was a brave decision by Alcaraz not to bring him. And he was ultimately, I think he was undone by Enzo Gonzalez
I was about
because,
to say, yeah, his performance, his sort of sending off also kind of triggered
yeah.
a, a series of events that I think if he was still in there, Paraguay would have a much different approach to all these games.
Yeah, that was it because I think that the reason he doesn't call up Komet is because he has Octavio Alfonso and he knows he's bringing in Enzo Gonzalez. And the whole team was going to be built around Enzo Gonzalez. We saw it in the first match against Panama. He was doing everything. And that Panama game is totally different to the other three, right? They scored 3 goals in that game and then they scored one in the remaining 3 matches. I mean, Enzo Gonzalez is so important. And so the big question is to get sent off for the challenge against South Korea. It was, yeah, that kind of he. I know he felt like it was unfair that he gets three
I mean,
games.
you saw the reaction too as well, saying
He
that,
reacted on Instagram that, yeah, but I mean, ultimately, a red card for if you get a straight red and it's violent conduct. I mean, if you get a straight red, it's usually going to be violent conduct, and it's usually going to be 3 match ban. I mean, I don't know what he was expecting. So the mistake was on him. And it was such a shame because he really was irreplaceable. I mean, Octavio Alfonso, he wasn't as good as we saw him before, but also he's a slightly different player. He's not like able to connect and make passes. He's more like he wants to pick up the ball, run at people. And so it wasn't gonna fit uh the way Alcaraz had imagined it, I think. But it did raise a question mark at that point when you were searching for goals. Did you want someone like Luka Kamet, who again isn't the perfect player because for me he needs a lot of people to run around him. He needs a lot of work around him. But in that game against Norway, where we're just talking about Norway, were not pressing. They were just so kind of slow in everything they did. That would have actually suited Komet perfectly. So it was a shame we didn't see him. But again, this is all talking about in Paraguay they say you're talking with the Monday's newspaper, right? Because you've already seen the results. I think Alcaraz at the time wasn't expecting Enzo Gonzalez to get sent off in the second.
no, no, totally. I mean, also we have the news that Alcaraz will stay as the head coach. Elvio Paltoroso had insisted on that actually yesterday. I mean, at this point, what do you do? Because I think also a lot of blame had been placed on Alcaraz and some of his choices, his tactical awareness, what he should have done against Norway or Ukraine. But it's who you stick to it, I guess, until the end.
Yeah, I think it was a bit. I mean, the game against Panama was a really good example of why he was so good in the Sudamericana because it was very similar though when Paraguay were like just digging out results, finding the way to score, and it was partly because he was able to bring the team together and play as a unit or play to win without sometimes systems go out the window when you're looking for that last minute equalizer or winner. And then the South Korea game, you can't really blame him when your number 10 isn't meant to get sent off. I mean, you can plan for a defender getting sent off or even a goalkeeper, but you don't expect the number 10 to be sent off like that. So it's hard to call. I thought the Ukraine game, the Ukraine were probably a superior side, to be honest. It wasn't too tactically, there was much he could have done. And then in this last one in Norway is maybe where he slips up, right? Because could he have made the changes earlier? That's what I was thinking. It was Paraguay were so in control. Maybe he was thinking, I don't want to change it because the goal's coming. But he doesn't actually make a change. I'm just looking until the 87th minute. I mean, maybe there was a time just to freshen something up, especially with Aguaya on the bench and also with David Fernandez. So Thiago Caballero misses the penalty, and really after that he doesn't have a particularly good game. So there was a moment to bring in Fernandez, who had played a lot of the Sudamericano, had done okay. He hadn't scored a huge amount of goals, but he's very good at linking up with players. And so maybe that's where the big question mark was, should you have made those changes a bit earlier in the Norway game? But overall, I wouldn't say he should have been sacked for this. 4 games of the World Cup is not a bad thing at all.
Especially it's your first time in 12 years as well. I
Yeah.
think, it is typical of Paraguay to go in these kind of instances. They only have gone more farther away since 2001. That was the furthest they've ever gotten. So yeah, I mean, those are circumstances that one has to accept. But youth football is not done, of course, because obviously Paraguay will be playing in another youth tournament, this time on the women's team, the U17 Women's World Cup beginning in Morocco, obviously in a group with Japan, New Zealand, Zambia. And shout out, obviously, to Flor Cáceres, who made the squad alongside Galio Martinez. Really young, good squad of Paraguayan players who obviously uh, were doing so well in that U17 World Cup. They won, of course. And yeah, at least we get some more youth football, to say the least, on that end. And we have to see how they do next week. We all the talk about Paraguay on the U20 level, the senior level. Now it's time for the women's to do something. The girls, I should say.
Yeah, that's right. U17, they're already in Morocco. They're getting ready for that because I think their first game is like a
Hmm.
week away from recording. And then we got the U17's boys as well because Uglesic is getting his team ready for that World Cup. And so that would be exciting. If I remember correctly, the U17s have never won, the girls have never won a World Cup match. So they previously played, but they didn't win any games. So this first match against Zambia on the 19th is going to be a huge, I think, opportunity to do that. And of course, everybody's talking about Claudia Martinez because Olympia have just crashed out of the women's Libertadores with not a single point. And did they score a goal? I can't remember, but they've crashed out. And of course, Martinez, she couldn't play because she's traveled to the World Cup. And that was when everything was happening, that was the big thing of, does she go to the World Cup or does she play Libertadores? And I think the World Cup was a much bigger pull in the end, even though it's U17s compared to a senior tournament. But you could see, just sometimes you see how good a player is when the team does so badly without them in there. So yeah, there'll be a lot of eyes on her for sure.
And the aura of the World Cup is irresistible as well. So I think it proves that ultimately the national team takes priority on that one. Speaking of the domestic game, obviously we had the Intermedia come to a close. We had officially seen Rubio New and San Lorenzo be promoted. We've seen the relegation of Guarani de Fran, Pastoreo, and River Plate. I mean, it was a crazy last weekend of matches. I think it felt like Capiatá were in the position to actually go and get promoted, but ultimately San Lorenzo, the Raidito, and of course from my hometown where I live, or at least where I have my house in Paraguay, go up to the first division and to beat them out by 1 point. What a crazy way to end the Intermedia.
Yeah, it was poor Capiatà. They were all heartbroken because they were in the driving seat, like you were saying. They were ahead of San Lorenzo going into the final day, so a win against a Carapaguá that didn't need any points for anything. They had nothing to play for. That would have just seen them get into the Primera or back into Primera. But instead it is San Lorenzo. So good for you, good for your hometown. I think they're back. I can't remember their last at 2020, 2021. It's been a few years. So it's good for them to get back in there. And just for the Capiatá game, it was crazy as well because Carapeguá got 2 penalties. It was a 2-2 draw, and both of Carapeguá's goals were from penalties. So even a bigger heartbreak, I think, for the Capiatá team. Um, that down the other end, yeah, we talked about it right the last week, and I think we all expected Pastoreo to go down because they were behind everybody in the standings. But for River Plate, they could have stayed up really, and then they went behind to Resistencia. They grabbed the draw, but it wasn't enough because although they had the same average as Fernando de la Mora. It ended up going with the games between those teams this season. They both won one game each, but on aggregate, Fernando de la Mora had won one game 3-0, and River Plate had only beaten them 2-1. So, I mean, what a way to be relegated. And for River Plate, it's a big shame because it's not long ago they're playing Sudamericana. And we've seen this before, teams that play Copa Sudamericana and then they're down in third division. And it just it's brutal in terms of the finances, right? To go from that kind of swing. So we'll see how they do. They've been down there recently before. I'm sure they'll end up coming back. But what a big swing. But great for San Lorenzo join Rio New in the Primera next year.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be an entertaining game, an entertaining season. We have obviously, San Lorenzo are back. We have the Clásico Trinidense as well. We've said, both Rubio and New against Sportivo Trinidad, which, I don't think we've seen in first division ever, or at least in a long time. So I think that's going to be a very much a good affair. And obviously 26 will be a big one for the World Cup too. So a lot of eyes, I guess, in Paraguay on the domestic game, and of course the international game coming up next year. Obviously, we have the Copa Paraguay still undergoing over there as well. With a lot going on, obviously Cerro Porteño, they broke that hump to finally beat Sol de America in the round of 16. They beat them 1-0, barely doing it, of course. Now they get to take on Real Caballero de Juan León Mallorquín. I mean, look, it comes at a good position for them. They got River Plate. They got Guarani against River Plate. They got Tempetre against 2 de Mayo, and you got Nacional 12 de Octubre. Cerro Porteño should be in a position to make it to the final and to play either one of Guarani or Nacional in that position. I don't remember how the things go. I believe they would play the winner of Nacional 12 de Octubre, but logic would say, obviously all goes well, Cedro plays Nacional and then they take on Guarani in the final, right?
That's what everything seems to be pointing towards. I mean, Guarani are actually the only team now left in this final eight that have actually won the tournament before, even been to a final. No, I think Nacional have been to a final, but it's all looking like you get you have the all Primera clash, Tembetaru and Dos de Mayo. One of them are through, and then you'd assume the other three Primera teams make it through to semifinals, and yeah, you're looking at this could be a Cerro Guarani final, and they're also facing off in the league. So the two best teams at the second half of the season, at the very least, it's all pointing towards that. But you never know with cup football, and also with Cerro are in this little balance, right, where they're trying to chase the league and they're having to play Copa Paraguay, and they played a pretty strong team. They scored very early on against Sol de America with Jonathan Torres penalty. But we might have to see, right, how they end up trying to balance it out, knowing that they've got a really difficult run in the league coming up. So they have to balance with that as well.
Yeah, they got Dos de Mayo obviously this weekend actually, but then they got the Super Clásico, they got Nacional, they got Guarani, and then they finish it out with Trinidense Libertad and Tembetaru. So yeah, and of course Copa Paraguay. So they got a really brutal run. And hey, if they can do this and get one trophy, then that would be fantastic. I mean, it's gonna be an interesting end for Guarani too. You have to remember those are both teams that are fighting for something to really cap off their season on a high and obviously, do well to go with it. So, of course, we will talk about that as we always do in our next episode of Guarani Vision as we close it out for myself, Roberto Rojas, and Rolf Hanna. Thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.